Georgia under Kirby Smart has a culture problem. And I don't think there is a way for even the most ardent Georgia supporter to deny that. Now, I know that they will. I know that we live in a world with my team can do no wrong and everybody else is a villain, just the most evil, horrible, horrendous people in the history of the planet. And I know that we do that. But when the results are put directly in front of your face over and over and over again, I don't know how you can ignore it. 2 more Georgia players have been charged with reckless driving, and I think it was the last week. That's 15 players that have been charged with speeding or reckless driving or whatever the case may be related to unsafe driving under Kirby Smart in the last couple of years. People in their program died from reckless driving, from racing. And it's still happening. Now, I can't sit here and tell you that I know the answer to figuring out the problem, but to pretend as if there is not a problem is disingenuous. If this were any other situation, it would be a really, really, really big time story. If 15 players at Georgia had been charged with gun crimes or had been charged with possession of illegal drugs, or 15 players had gotten DUIs, or 15 players had stolen from a store, or whatever, we can go on and on and on. If it was damn near any other crime, it would be a big deal. But because it's driving and because it's college kids, it's really just kind of whatever. But when you couple the fact that people inside their program died from this, and it's still an issue, I don't know how you pretend it's not. When Urban Meyer was the head coach in Florida and they had dozens of players arrested, nobody sat there and pretended as if they were actually, choir boys and that they just were misunderstood. Or nobody said, well, it's not fair that the Gainesville Police Department they're targeting the football players. If you are pulled over for speeding, reckless driving, racing, whatever, I find it really hard to make that up. I find it really hard for the Athens, Georgia Police Department to fabricate that evidence, or whoever it is that you got pulled over by. Also, I don't know how to tell you this, but generally, in college towns, the college is king. And in those college towns, like Athens, Georgia, the football players are bigger than kings. So when they're being arrested, charged, ticketed, pulled over, whatever the case may be, it's probably happening more often than you know about because it's sometimes swept under the rug. And that is not a fun thing to confront because it's already prevalent in the program. And culture is a word used, in my very humble opinion, all too often in college sports. Every single time there is a coaching change, even if it's because the last guy retired as the best to ever do it, the new coach at his press conference will talk about culture. We are going to build a culture. We are going to do this for our culture. Right now, Georgia's culture is breaking the law in the sitting behind the driver's seat. And I don't know what I will tell you flat out, I don't know the answer. I don't know if it's just Kirby Smart saying, nobody in this program drives anymore. You all are grounded. And I know you can't do that. But I don't know if it's getting an NIL deal with Uber and Lyft or whatever the case may be. But you got to do something to figure it out and get it handled. Because for this to continually happen over and over and over again and continue to happen after people associated with your program died, for the players to continue to not take it seriously, I don't know what the remedy is. But you cannot be a Georgia fan, booster, athletic department member, member of the coaching staff, whatever the case, and look past it. It keeps happening over and over and over again. And so you can make excuses for it. And I realize that this is challenging, like, people's fandom. Like, there are people who make college football their personality, that I'm a fan of this team, and that's what you're going to know about me, and that's what's going to define me. And it's the same for TV shows, politics, bands, whatever the case may be. But when you're confronted with the 15th different guy to do this, how do you pretend that it's anything else? Like, I think it's the real markings of a man that can look past things and go, I might love Georgia football, or I might love insert whatever thing here, but there is an issue here that needs fixed. And to pretend otherwise is disingenuous as all get out. Georgia has a problem, and it needs fixed before something really bad and really tragic happens again. And I saw, I'll have to pull it up so I can read it verbatim, because it's the dumbest thing I think I've read on Twitter in a long time. It was a Georgia website called the Bulldog Report that said, when adults stop racing and speeding on the streets daily, then they can say Georgia has a culture problem. What? There's a difference between speeding and reckless driving. If the speed limit on the interstate is 70 miles an hour and I set my cruise control to 78, am I speeding? Yes. Am I breaking the law? Yes. Am I driving recklessly? No. If I'm going 120, like the idea that because if I set my cruise control to 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, I can't say like, hey, maybe the 15th guy at this program who's been charged driving 120 might want to slow it down. You can't say you got a culture problem until that. It's so insanely dumb. They continued by saying street racing culture has been celebrated for years, but when a football player does it, y'all want to judge. Y'all hypocrites need to stay in your lane. No, it's real simple. It's really simple. You have an issue. And instead of defending yourself when it's so blatantly obvious that you have an issue, I don't understand, and I'll never get the mindset of like not calling for accountability from the people who have the ability to hold the players accountable, hold whoever is doing the bad things accountable. Kirby Smart has that power as the Sultan of Georgia football. And it seems to me to be abundantly clear that he has not used that. And so I think it's time to do that. I don't know what that entails, but it sure beats sitting on your ass and doing nothing, waiting for somebody else in your program or another situation in your program to have a tragedy. They have a problem, and it's time to fix it. The end. See how easy that was? Even if it's for my favorite football team, for my favorite college football program. If that were the case, it's real simple to just look at things objectively and go like, holy cow. Even if it was as minute as like 15 players had broken into cars on campus, nobody in their right mind would defend that as like, unless you've ever... If you've never accidentally left a gas pump without paying, you can't talk. If 15 of your players stole a sandwich from Subway, you've got a theft issue. If 15 players of your program had guns, you got a gun issue. If 15 players of your program beat their girlfriends up, you've got a domestic violence issue. No other problem would be viewed that way except for these guys are just driving fast. Yeah. and people in their program died from it. And yet, and it's not just driving fast. They're getting pulled. Like if it was like the 9th time that there was a story in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, it was like backup Georgia quarterback pulled over for going 62 and a 45. Nobody would care. But when you're racing, when you're going 109 and a 55, people are going to put 2 and 2 together eventually and be like, what the hell is going on there? So the idea that because they're real good at football, they are unchallengeable citizens. No, you kind of got to exist in both lanes there. And in one lane right now, a somewhat sizable chunk of the Georgia football roster is failing. And you got to do something about it. Because you're going to get another situation where you got to go to a funeral. And you know what? I don't know if you go to those all that often. They're not fun, especially when you are entrusted to lead those people. And you're part of the allure of holding the job you hold is because you enjoy building relationships with young people, watching them grow as football players, as people, as students, whatever. And then when they end up in caskets, that's supposed to suck. And it appears as if it doesn't at Georgia. And I don't know how you compute that and still defend that you don't have a problem. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. I'll let my blood pressure lower just a little bit, but it just pisses me off that the idea that like we are so locked in as college football fans that we can't see reality in front of our eyes. It drives me nuts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you are listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.